For me, I think of reading a bit like the top of this arch. If you look at the picture here of an arch at the top, you see a special stone, which is bigger than the others, and I've circled it in red. And that is called a keystone. One word, a keystone. And the keystone is the most important stone because it supports all of the other stones. Some of the other stones or blocks might fall off or get damaged, but the arch will still remain. But the keystone, that's really at the center of it. You have to have the keystone. Now, for me, I think of reading a bit like a keystone because if you can read well, then it supports all of the other skills. What's the best way to learn how to write? Read lots. If you want, we know that people who read more and read more extensively are better at speaking because when you read, you get lots of ideas presented to you in a very logical way, right? Which is a clearly phrased, good writing. And then it helps you to understand how to express yourself and think clearly and speak clearly. We also know that people who read more are better listeners. Now, we don't understand exactly why, but it's probably to do with vocabulary. If you read more, you see lots of words you kind of half know. Maybe you've seen them before, but you cannot really say them yet. But the more you read, the more you see those words again and again and again in context. And so you see the other words you can say them with, you get the phrases. And so if you read all that, you can speak. You have all of that kind of language knowledge built into you. You digest it through reading, and then you can speak better too. And so, and you can listen better because the words you've kind of learned, you just digest them. You know them automatically. So when you listen to someone speaking, if you've read a lot, you can hear a word and know it straight away. If a student has only read a word and memorized it from a reading list and they're listening, they hear a word they've memorized, they have to do this. Oh, what was that word? Yeah. Oh. And then you've missed the next few words, right? And you have to concentrate so hard. If you read, you just know vocabulary better. So you hear it, you know it. So that is huge. Okay, reading definitely powers your vocabulary, and that helps all skills. And the last point is that reading is a crucial skill for exams. In exams, you have long passages. Some students read so slowly, they run out of time. Even in the listening section of an exam, you still have to read the questions quickly, don't you? So reading is crucial. So we have to teach reading. And the point here is that we cannot just teach reading. The job of the teacher, nowadays at least, is first, I think of it like this. My first job in a reading lesson is to get the students interested. I want my students coming to me and begging me, oh, teacher, please, I want to read the passage. Please, can you help? Can we open our books? Can we look at the article? That's what you want, right? Once you've gotten them interested, then they're motivated to read, and then they read, and then they do something. This is what I think of like when you think pre-reading, while reading, post-reading. I think of it like this. And the most important part for me is to get students interested in the first place. And if you get them interested, the rest flows through. So I'm going to focus a lot on that in this session. Okay. And then we have a good point from Duyen. Some students are afraid of reading because there are many new words in the text. We all understand, okay, where if you've studied another language, it's stressful to see a text because you think, oh, it's painful to get through that. So we can all understand that, but there are definitely ways we can raise our students' confidence. Okay, so that's a little introduction. Thank you for that. Now let's go to an overview of the Friends Plus series. And I'm not going to give you the whole overview. For that, I have a link to share with you later. I'm going to focus on things to do with reading to contextualize the reading demonstration or run through I'm going to give later. So first of all, if you're completely new to Friends Plus, just understand that this is part of a big series which goes all the way from primary, family and friends, through secondary with Friends Plus, through to Friends Global, right? Higher, more mature levels. And so this is the Friends series. Today we're focusing on Friends Plus in the middle. And we are using examples from grade 6. Okay, grade 6, which is what? Tian An Sao, I think, Friends Plus. Right. Okay, but note that what I say here also applies to the other levels in the series. And we are focusing our example on Unit 1 and the reading lesson. So here, this is letting you know the context. We're zooming into the reading lesson. But what we need to understand is that the reading lesson doesn't work on its own. The unit design means that what we have is a link. Especially obvious is that students study vocabulary first. That vocabulary from lesson 1 in the unit is recycled in the reading lesson, and new vocabulary is introduced too. Also important, the reading lesson shows some examples of a grammar point in context. And then those grammar points are studied explicitly in the next lesson, which is the grammar lesson called language focus. Okay, so there's a lot of like work between the lessons here in this unit. And there's more which I'll show you later, but let's focus on that first. So generally about the methodology of reading lessons, as I've mentioned, they recycle vocabulary from the vocab lesson and they preview the grammar, which students will study next in the language focus lesson. Now, there are a wide variety of text types which you get in Friends Plus. So you'll sometimes get articles, stories, questionnaires, emails, websites, and so on. Okay, quizzes, all sorts of text types so students get comfortable with different formats and different styles of reading. The texts are graded, which means their language level is carefully controlled and designed. Now, I can tell you that in the reading lesson, the reading text, the language lesson is designed, the language is designed to be a little bit higher than the language students have already learned, but just a little bit, okay, so that students can attain it, and they will apply reading skills to do that. Okay, so what else do we have? Yes, narrated audio tracks. So audio tracks for all of the reading lesson texts, there are audio tracks. If you look very carefully at exercise 2, you'll see a little icon. There are many ways you can access the audio track. They're on the teacher's website, they're also on the classroom presentation tool and digital format and so on. So audio tracks are useful because if you ask students to just read a text silently, sometimes they don't know how the intonation works. They might read like this: imagine a 5-star. But if you play the audio track first and let them listen, they can hear a narrator read it. And then when they read it themselves silently, they can kind of copy the narrator's intonation and learn fluency that way. Okay, so occasionally you will see an OUP moderator in the chat box posting quite useful links to you. So that's a little bit about how reading relates to the other lessons. Now let's get into how the reading lesson works in itself. All right. So by just spending 5 minutes going through how the lesson works, it'll help you to see how I use my activities when I show ideas for teaching a lesson and motivating students. I would like you to focus on the little circular Vietnam flag. Okay, we have the yellow star, and there we have it on the red little circle. Okay, so that is next to the top of the page where it's I can statements. Let's zoom in and have a look. So an I can statement, I can predict the content of a text from photos. So that's one skill students will be able to do at the end of this lesson, and that provides a clear objective for each lesson. It's not the only objective, but it's something you can say to students at the beginning and the end. Okay, look, now can you predict the content of a text from photos? Yes, okay. So students know what they've achieved. Next, if you look at the Vietnam star there, we have think. So think is really the first activity, and it introduces key vocabulary for the text you see here: on a cruise ship, in a city, by the sea. So you can pre-teach that to students if you want to, but Also, what the think exercise does is activate students' prior knowledge of the topic. So where do you think is a good place for a holiday? Why? And you can also use the pictures here to ask to see what students know about holidays, cruise ships. Okay, see what they know. Okay, I know for some of you in Ho Chi Minh City, there's a cruise ship stops on the river there, right? Right. Okay, down to the reading text. So as I've mentioned before, it contextualizes vocabulary from the previous lesson, models grammar that students will study in the next lesson. Can anyone guess what the grammar point is? And I'm not going to let you, I'm going to show you later, all right? I'm going to show you later. So later I'll give you more time to read it. I don't want to give you a chance to read it now, but see if you can see what the grammar point is. All right. Oh, and finally, or not finally, but nearly coming towards the end, there are comprehension exercises. So these practice vocabulary and they develop different reading subskills, different strategies. So each text, so you'll get exercise 1. If we look at that, that's actually a pre-reading activity. Look at the photos. So that's practicing previewing what's in a text by looking at the pictures. And we also see the grammar point, by the way. There's a certain grammar point in the questions too. And then, so that question 1 is really about a global understanding of the text and the topic. And then then we get a skills strategy or exercise 2, number 2 in red. So exercise 1, global understanding of the text. Exercise 2, students are focusing more on detail, more careful reading. And then we have Vocabulary Plus. You can see where it is with the Vietnam flag. And here we're taking vocabulary, which is highlighted in blue from the reading text, and doing some work with that, some dictionary work, and there's more practice in the workbook. And then finally, and you get this at the end of every lesson of Friends Plus, use it. So use it's always at the end, as it is in the reading lesson, and it gets students to talk about or use some of the language they've learned. In this case, they have learned it through reading. And that shows students that at the end of each lesson, they can do something with the language they've learned, and so the lesson was useful to them. Okay, and you can see the question, it's personalizing. So students are being asked personalized questions about the topic to get them to connect with it. Okay, so that's our overview. Okay, and now we're going to go into the activities. Okay, so this, I'm rubbing my hands here. I'm going to do this. This is the main section of this morning's webinar, where I want to show you or share with you ideas which I hope can engage our students in reading lessons. And it starts with pre-reading. And it starts, I think, with understanding the purpose of these exercises. Because if you understand the purpose of an exercise in the reading lesson, you know what the goal of it is, then you can either follow the teacher's book, or you can find your own ways, techniques and activities to achieve that purpose. So what do you think? If you could please answer in the chat box. What do you think is the purpose of this activity? Think. I've given you a little, I've already kind of given you a couple of answers. So what's the purpose of this? What do we think? What is this trying to do? And remember, this is a pre-reading activity. And as a brainstorming, I'm just going to sip some water. It's getting hotter here. Set the scene for the reading passage. Help students to kind of recall vocabulary. I love that. Dao says, make students curious about what they're learning. Dao, that's my favorite word, curious. That, I think, is, for me as a teacher, the key word in the pre-reading phase. Get students' attention. Okay, we have lots of answers. Get students guessing, which is predicting. I think you've got them all. Okay, so I had some clues for you, but I don't think you need the clues. Let's just jump. So here are 4 points. There may be more. Recalling schemata, says to or tho. So I'll read through my points here. Encourage students to engage with the topic of the text. So the keyword there, engage, right? Not just read about a ship, but engage with the topic. That's a much deeper connection. And if you engage with the topic, you'll be more interested and motivated to read the text. You'll also remember language better. Next point, evaluate students' knowledge of the text. So how much do students know about cruise ships or not? You want to see how much background knowledge your students have. If they have zero background knowledge, you may like to tell them a little bit to contextualize the topic. Third point, give students reasons to want to read the text. In other words, motivation. That's key for me. And then the other one is pre-teach any key vocabulary. Not all vocabulary, just the key words they really need to know and that you think it's impossible for them to guess from context. And you see the 3 key words or key phrases in the think box. So now we know the purpose. All right. So, you know, we've got the purpose: pre-teaching vocabulary, encouraging prediction, activating interest in a topic. I'm going to share with you several different things we can do to achieve this or these purposes. And I like to use images, right, to encourage interest in a topic, to encourage students to predict. So I have a question for you. These are the 3 images in this lesson. What do most teachers do with images? Now here's a clue. I've observed hundreds of lessons and I've taught myself for many, many years. Most of the time, I see a lot of teachers doing this. They say, open your pages. Okay, look at the pictures. What? Can you guess what a lot of teachers say? Do you know the question I've heard the most when I've observed teachers? The very first question is this. What do you see? And now a student puts their hand up and says, now, do students naturally say, oh, I see a picture of a cruise liner. It has many levels, and I imagine many passengers live there. No. Teachers ask questions. What do you see? One student puts their hand up, says, ship. Teacher says, oh, I see a ship. Okay. And then the students are all like this. The teacher says, oh, is it a big ship, a little ship? One student puts their hand up, answers. So what I did as a teacher is I stopped myself. I banned myself from ever asking, what do you see? Because I don't think it's very interesting. And here's why. When you ask a class of students, what do you see? Typically, one student puts their hand up and answers. What are the other students doing? Maybe nothing. Right? So here are some alternatives to what do you see, which I think get students thinking more, not just answering one question at a time, but thinking much, much more, and all students are participating. So the first thing we can do as a pre-reading activity is to brainstorm nouns, verbs, and prepositions. So if we take a look at this picture, can you now type some nouns, verbs, and prepositions which you see in the image? So the first one, I'll get started. I'm going to put a noun in there, some ship. I'm going to do nouns first. Ocean. Okay, I'm going to form that in. What else can you see? Okay, so I'm not going to ask you a question. I just want you to spend 1 minute and type as many words as possible that you see in the image. Don't ask questions, just type in words. Okay, this is excellent. So ship, sea, ship, sky, water, superb. And I'm seeing what vocabulary you know. And we're pulling lots of words from the picture. See, if I ask you, what do you see? Ship. It's one word at a time. It's so slow. But here you're looking at lots of details too. Sail, ship, so a cruise ship, ocean, ship. What about some verbs? Sometimes I do adjectives too, but not today. Wow, look at all of these words coming through. Water, travel is a good verb. Sail is a good verb. Well done. In, on. Yeah. Wow. Now you see, isn't this great? Because you're typing if it's in a classroom or even in an online classroom, sometimes I would put students in groups of 3 or 4 and they all write the words in columns. If it's a very weak class, I say this group you do nouns, this group you do verbs, this group you do prepositions. You can adjust it. But now what we've got, isn't that so much better? In 1 minute, students can give me maybe 20 or 30 words and I can see what they know. That's far, far better than one student answering ship, right? And so you're actually activating your schemas of vocabulary from this photo. Okay, so now what you can do next is then see which group has the most words, teach any words they might need which they didn't get, and students can now make sentences to describe the image. So using their words from the table, they could make a sentence such as, okay, so they have ship, ocean, on, sail. Oh, the ship is sailing on the ocean. Very good. What other sentences can you make about this ship? The ship is traveling on the sea, something like that, right? Just using your nouns, verbs, and prepositions. And and again, students are creating language. It's better than one by one answering, what do you see? And the final thing that students can do, I can see a ship on the sea. Very good. The ship is very big. There are many floors. There is a big ship on the sea. And the final thing students can do, which can be more difficult for some classes, but is challenging and worth it, is, okay, this is a very important point for me. I don't like, in lower secondary classes, I find students can sometimes just be tired, very, very tired, right? They have a lot of pressure. And so what happens is you can get a dynamic in the classroom or online, if it's an online lesson, where the teacher's the one who's doing all the thinking and all of the hard work, and the students are just, the teacher asks the questions, the students answer. I think it's important to switch that dynamic. And so that the students are the ones asking the questions. So something I like to do is put students into groups of 3 or 4 and say, you have 2 minutes. Here's a blank piece of paper. I want you to look at this photo and make as many questions about it as you can. Go. So can you make some questions about the photo and type them? And as you do that, I'll explain why. The first time I did this, my students were shocked because they're thinking, huh? Because they're so used to the teacher asks the questions and the students answer. So the first time was very difficult for them. The second time it got easier. After 3 or 4 times doing this, maybe just once a week, students become different. The classroom changes. Instead of waiting for the teacher to ask the questions and being passive, students are looking at a picture and doing this. What is this? Where is it? Who's that? What's happening? And then those are just general questions, and then detailed questions. What's the name of the ship? How many people are there inside the ship? Where will the ship travel? Okay, and students get better asking questions. They're thinking more actively. And you know what happens? Students, when they ask questions, they become curious and they think, oh, how many people are there on the ship? Teacher, how many people are there on the ship? I say to them, I don't know. If you want to know the answer, what must you do? Read. And now my students are motivated to read because we got them curious. Now, just to be very clear, I'm not saying you need to do all of these things in your pre-reading. Actually, maybe only one or 2. But I'm trying to give you a menu of different activities you can use so that each lesson you can maybe choose this one, next lesson choose that one, and so on. Okay, just to be clear about that. So those are some alternatives for using images, and all of them, I think, get students thinking far more actively than the teacher saying, what do you see? Which I don't do anymore, ever. Okay, so if we look at exercise 1, This is also a pre-reading. We're looking at the photos, but we're asking questions. So again, is there a school and a library on the ship? Students are predicting from using photos. Okay, look at the picture, predict the answer. Now, there are other ways that we can do that. Again, the purpose of this exercise is one, practice this skill. Predict the content of a text from photos. But the other purpose, of course, is to get students curious, to get students predicting. So now we're going to do a true or false, okay? A true or false, because this is another way we can get students curious. I'm going to read 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I'd like you to type in the chat box is first type the number 1 and then type T or F. So let's do it all together. Number 1, the ship has more than 12,000 chefs. If you think that's true, type number 1, true, as Toy has done there. If you think it's false, you type 1, F. The ship has more than 12,000 chefs. True or false? So many of you saying true, some false. 50-50, true or false? Okay, now I'm going to move on to number 2. Bear in mind there's a delay. What you type is about 15 seconds behind what I'm saying. Okay, so that's why I get you to type the number. Number 2, there are shops, cinemas, and theaters on the cruise ship. What do you think? True or false? So number 2, true or false? And okay, you know your answers. I'm seeing the matrix code. Okay, so again, some true, some false. Number 3, there are no swimming pools. Passengers jump into the ocean and swim there. Okay, which is a relatively new thing. It's good for the environment, and there are lots of ladders where the passengers can climb back up onto the ship, no problem. So number 3, there are no swimming pools. Passengers that jump into the ocean and swim there. And number 4, there is a park in the middle of the ship. Okay, a nice park, lots of trees, lots of flowers. What do you think for number 4? Okay, so 3, most of you are saying false. Really? I wonder. Okay, so you've had a guess, and there are like nearly 2,000 of you. Okay, so the chat box is very quick. But would you like me to show you the answers, by the way, before I move on with this presentation? Would you like me to show you the answers? Yes or no? You can type yes or no if you want to know the answers, because maybe I can show them to you. T or F. Would you like to know the answers? Just let me know. Yes, someone says yes. Okay, well, let's see if a few, yes, okay. Would you like to know the answers? I'm not going to show you the answers, because if you want to know if your guess was true or false, if it was right or wrong, what do you need to do? You need to read the text yourself. Okay, and that's what we do as students. It's all about getting you curious, giving you a reason to want to read the text. Motivating reading lessons. That's the title of this session, right? So you never tell students the answer. You say, oh, you want to know if that's true or not? Read it yourself. Now the student's saying, okay, teacher, can we open the books? Can we read? Right? This is the point. The teacher's job is not just to teach reading. Nowadays, the teacher first has to get the students interested and motivate them, give them reasons to read. Okay, now, there are other things we can do to encourage prediction and interest in the topic. We can look at headings, and sometimes there are subheadings. This article has one heading, it's a title, City on the Sea. So that's interesting. I can City on the Sea. Now, what does that mean, city? What does that tell you? What does a city have? And students can say, well, a city has lots of people. So what can you guess about this article or this ship from the word city on the sea? There are many people. There are many things like cinemas or something, right? So the headings are very useful. You can get students not just to do this, city on the sea, but explore what that implies. right? You can, if we look at number 3 bullet point now, this number 3 bullet point, discuss the genre. So where would you find this kind of article? For example, can you find it in a like online, maybe in a newspaper? Is it in a storybook, in a magazine? What kind? If it's a website, what kind? So that's useful, right? And then the 4th bullet point, what information do students expect? So if you look at the pictures, if you look at the title, City on the Sea, what information do you expect to see here? Would you expect the name of the ship? Would you expect some statistics? If so, what? And so on. So it gets students predicting. Okay, so that's things you can do. You can also do some other pre-reading activities with words. So something that you can do is pre-teach vocabulary, but also use the vocabulary. So just to be clear, before this slide, I shared with you ways to use to encourage prediction. First, we did using images. Okay, now we're doing, if I go back, using images. Then we did ways to encourage students to predict, okay, and get them curious. And then the final kind of pre-reading activity I share with you now is vocabulary based, okay? So for example, word rows would be on my whiteboard, whether it's online, digital whiteboard, or in the classroom. I like to write these little flowers. Okay, these aren't really roses, but that's the name of the activity, word rows. And here we can see some words. Cabins for 6,360 people. I'm starting on the left. And then going round clockwise for each flower. 20 cafes and restaurants, 250 chefs, 2,000 people. So I can go over the vocabulary, but then I can ask my students questions. I can say, each flower contains some keywords from one paragraph. Now I can tell you that this text we are going to read has 3 different paragraphs. 1, 2, 3. Which flower do you think contains words or phrases from the first paragraph, which is, do you think it's the flower on the left, in the middle, or on the right? So you can type, which of these flowers do you think is words from the first paragraph? Is it L for left, M for middle, or R for right? You can type in. And I see a lot of answers about magazines, which is from my question from a couple of minutes ago, right? We have to get used to this kind of little delay here. So your Van says right. On the right, okay. So we've got a couple of answers saying on the right, so a little bit of left, da, 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 and over to the right, ba, ba, da, da. There's no one in the middle, ba, ba, da, da, but people on the right, ba, ba, da, da. So I have to cut this a bit short, but I would ask students, well, why do you think it's on the left? Or, okay, the right one, why is it on the right? And students might say, well, because this is a non-fiction text, it's got information. Usually you start off with an introduction, general information first, and then you get into specifics and numbers. So I wouldn't start an article by saying there are 2,000 people on the ship. I would probably first introduce this ship is a 5-star hotel. It is a very big ship with comfortable rooms. And then in the middle, I'd have more detailed information. So we can talk about things like that, right? But what I would say to students again is, guess what's paragraph 1, guess which flower is paragraph 2, guess which flower is paragraph 3, and then do you want to know the answer? I'm not telling you. If you want to know what's right, what do you have to do? Open the book and read the text yourself. It's all about getting students to read, getting them curious, right? That's our game here as teachers. Then, if students are hooked and curious and engaged, then we teach them how to read. It sticks. It sticks. Okay. Let's see now. I'm gonna, Sophia, could you play the? Okay, I'm just looking at the time and just checking. Let's see. Do you know what? Let's yeah, let's play this a little. Okay, so what I do here, just hold on a second, is I say to students, if this is for weak classes who need to listen to the text first before they read, right? That can help. I say to my students, choose one phrase from any flower, just one phrase. And everyone, can you just choose one phrase? So maybe someone has chosen five-star hotel, maybe another student has chosen 2,000 people, and I want you to hold it in your head, okay? So everyone, have you chosen one phrase? Don't tell me, it's your secret, and don't tell anyone else. Now what happens is all the students stand up. Now we're not going to do this in this webinar, but online often you have hands up and hands down kind of, if it's an online class, you can use that. Like everyone put your hands up icon on. And everyone in a normal classroom, everyone stands up and you simply listen. And when you hear your phrase, you sit down, okay? So I'm only going to play you the first paragraph, just so you see how this works. So Sophia, please play this audio file.
Unit 1, Reading. Exercise 2.
So pretend I'm standing up.
City on the sea. Imagine a 5-star hotel with fantastic food and comfortable rooms. Imagine a square, shops, cinemas and theatres. Imagine all of these things on one very big ship, Oasis of the Seas. More than 2,000 people work on Oasis of the Seas, and there are cabins for 6,360 passengers. That's a lot of people, and they eat a lot of food in the ship's 20 cafes and restaurants. There are 250 chefs. It's the first ship with a park. It's called Central Park,
okay, we'll leave this
and it's got 50 real trees and 12,000 plants. If you like sport, there are also 5 swimming pools, and there's an exciting sports area with a climbing wall. If you prefer reading, there's a library. But relax, there isn't a school on the ship.
Okay, so that gives you a chance to hear the narration. And what's nice about that is if you have a weak class and a little bit of listening first can help them to read more fluently. Thank you. And someone's microphone is on. Yes, now it's off. Great. And all the students pay attention. That's the key thing, because they all want to sit down. No one wants to be standing up. And so they all, here's one thing you do if it's in a real classroom and not online, right? Is first the students choose a phrase or a word. I like to use phrases, right? But first they must whisper what the word I chose. I chose imagine a square, right? Imagine a square, imagine a square. They just whisper it to the person on their left and right. And the only rule I have is you're not allowed to have the same word as the person next to you. If we both have imagine a square, me and the person next to me, one of us must change. You know why? Because if I know that this person has imagine a square and I have the same, I can not listen, but just watch them. And as soon as I see them sit down, I sit down too, right? I can cheat. So you have to make sure students just have something different from the person next to them. Then they really focus and listen carefully. And that's nice as a pre-reading for weaker students. Okay, that's sit down words. And you can also do that online with stand up, sit down items, which you have, functions you have in online classes. Okay, so that's we're now into while reading activities, and I have to pick up my pace here because I've spent a little bit longer than I like. You know why? Because I'm so enthusiastic about these pre-reading activities. And I will stress, if later on I have to kind of skip through some post-reading activities, I hope you understand, because I do believe that the pre-reading is the most important stage. Because if in the pre-reading your students are not interested in the text and don't want to read, then nothing works. If the pre-reading works well and your students are curious, then the latter stages work. So I do focus on pre-reading a lot. Okay, next. while reading activities. Let's look at exercise 2. So we have a skills strategy, how to answer specific questions in a text, or about a text rather. Okay, and you have instructions. First, identify the keywords in the question. Next, scan the text for the keywords. Finally, you can find the correct answer in the sentence that has got the keywords. Okay, so students would read that and then apply it to exercise 2. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to practice scanning, right? Which is a key skill for exams, also useful in real life as well. Sometimes we just need to find a bit of information, right? We don't have to read everything all the time. So if I'm the teacher, this is how I would do this. I would say to my students, okay, exercise 2, question 1, what's the name of the ship? So I would say to my students, I'd give them time to take a highlighter pen or a red pen or something and underline or highlight the key words. So what are the key words? So what's the name of the ship? What do you think is the number one key word in that? Tran. There's no way I'd expect you to do all of these things in 45 minutes. Like I'd said, I'm giving you lots and lots of ideas. For each stage, you can just do one of them. Okay? So usually in pre-reading, I would do just maybe even 5 or 10 minutes, right? Okay, but because I'm showing you so many different activities, obviously it's taking longer in this session than a real class. So name and ship. And if I had to choose one, it would be name, right? Name is the number one keyword, ship is the next one. But this is what you do is, if you're teaching scanning skills, you don't just do this. What's the key word? Oh, name and then ship. Okay, go and scan, look for it. Well, no, you can do more as a teacher. So a name, what will your eyes look for? When you look for a name, okay, the first letter of a name is a what? Like if you see my name, Mark, the first letter is a, what kind of letter? It's a capital letter. Yeah. And so you tell, okay, look for capital letters. Sometimes what are names in? Names are in italics, sometimes in quotation marks, not always. And so that's what you do. So students then think, oh, and then you can ask this. Well, the name of the ship, do you think that's going to be nearer the start of a text about the ship? Or do you think at the end? I mean, we're not sure, but we can predict, right? Where would the name of a ship most likely be? Near the beginning or near the end or in the middle? And you know, your answers are taking a while to come through. Near the top, right? Because it's an important detail. And so this is what you do. It's not just look at number one, everyone. What's the key word? Oh, name, go, read. You help your students with their thinking, right? Scanning is not just about looking, it's about knowing what you're looking for. Capital letters, maybe italics or quotation marks, probably near the beginning. At least I'll look there first. These are the skills you teach, right? And the same, number 2, what are the key words? And I'll have to do this more quickly. People. Okay, people work. So how many is the question? So what are you looking for? A number. What do numbers look like? It's that kind of thing. Okay, so that's how we teach scanning, and then students go and find it. All right, let's see, how are we doing with the time? Yes, so that's a little bit about scanning. And what I'm going to do is just move forward here. So, and just give you a kind of look at this. So the first, I'm not going to, sorry, I was going to give you time to do a bit of scanning, but you get the idea. You don't need to do the exercise. You just need to understand how to present it to students. Okay, so generally, oh, by the way, though, so you can see what I mean. Oh, look, there we have Oasis of the Seas is the name, right? It's in italics. Oasis with a capital letter, it's in the first paragraph, right? Predictions help me to get the answer quickly. Okay, and then numbers, 2000, I look for numbers. So let's see. Yeah, by the way, remember I talked about grammar point. Can anyone guess what the grammar point is, which students will study in the next lesson? And I'll give you a clue. That, let's see. There are 250 chefs. Oh, there are cabins for 6,360 passengers. There's a library, but relax, there isn't a school on the ships. So one of the key grammar points is there is, there are, and then also are there, is there, exactly. Well done. Okay, so that's just presented in context here and not really studied, but students will pick up on it more in the next language, the grammar lesson, language focus. So just to recap while reading, the first reading is often global, right? And then you apply a comprehension strategy, such as scanning. So again, and students will read for gist, which is a sort of rough global understanding, and then for detailed understanding. If you have time, you can do subsequent readings for fluency, which, for example, I'd always do this. Let students listen to that CD track or audio track and read along. I always let them do that. And then let them read silently. If you have time to build their fluency, that's very, very useful. Okay, and fluency building strategies include things like telling students to skip over words they don't know and just keep moving. Okay, but let's move on because I want to get to Vocabulary Plus. So what's the purpose of Vocabulary Plus? Well, it's clearly about remembering vocabulary from the text, right? And so reading is one of the best ways to improve our vocabulary. So of course you can follow the activity as it is here. So use a dictionary to check the meanings of the words in blue in the text. And there are other activities for vocab suggested in the teacher's notes, in the teacher's guide. So, other things you can do. Sometimes students try and remember too many words. So if you look at the first bullet point here, you can tell students to choose 3 words they want to remember and they write them down. Oh, I choose this word, this word, this word. Sometimes getting students to choose 3 words is better and then they remember them. And it's better to remember 3 words well than try to remember like too many words and forget them all. Jump to bullet point number 3, okay? Recall. This is very simple, but there's a lot of quite scientific evidence that this works. Simply getting students to close their books. Do you remember any words from the reading article? What vocab do you remember? And students recall. Cruise ship. Passenger. And then they check. It's very simple, but that's proven to be a good way to get students to remember and recall and retrieve vocabulary. Jump to bullet point number 4. I'll come back to number 2, right? Now I'll show you that. Make sentences with the words. Yeah, so if you've got the word passenger, students write a sentence. Okay, but so that's pretty straightforward. But I want to show you what coffee pot is. So coffee pot is well, first you've heard the text. Let's just read the text again and I will guide you. So imagine, because in my class, students will have read and listened to the text 3 or 4 times, I think. Imagine a 5-star hotel with fantastic food and comfortable rooms. Imagine a square, shops, cinemas, and theaters. Imagine all of these things on one very big ship, Oasis of the Seas. More than 2,000 people work on Oasis of the Seas, and there are cabins for 6,360 passengers. That's a lot of people. And they eat a lot of food in the ship's 20 cafes and restaurants. There are 250 chefs. Not 12,000 chefs, by the way. It's the first ship with a park. It's called Central Park, and it's got 50 real trees and 12,000 plants. Ah, it does have a park, that's true. If you like sports, there are also 5 swimming pools, and there's an exciting sports area with a climbing wall. If you prefer reading, there's a library. But relax, there isn't a school on the ship. Now I need a sip of water. You can quickly look at this as I sip. Yeah, I don't want to lose my voice yet. I can lose my voice in 30 minutes and that's fine, but not now. Right, so coffee pot is this. Right, so I do this with pairs of students or groups of maybe groups of 3 or 4. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm looking over here because I'm reading the text. Okay, so I'm gonna read a sentence, but I will use the word coffee pot, and you have to guess what the word coffee pot should be, like this. It's the first ship with a coffee pot. What word is coffee pot? It's the first ship with a coffee pot. Can you type in what coffee pot should be? And you're just using your memory, but also you're using your knowledge of English and the context here. It's the first ship with a coffee pot. Lamb, well done. Number 1, lamb. Park. Okay, let's do another one. So in class, I would get several students, like 3 students. One of them has the book and they read a sentence, but they change one word. The other 2 have to kind of listen and be the first one to guess that missing word. Okay, here's another one. More than 2,000 people work on Oasis of the Seas, and there are coffee pots for 6,360 passengers. There are coffee pots with 6,360 passengers. There are coffee pots for 6,360 passengers. And someone's got it right. The word is, so there are coffee pots for 6,360 passengers. And what's the missing word? If you look at the first sentence of paragraph number 2, more than 2,000 people work on Oasis of the Seas, and there are cabins for 6,360 passengers. So that's a listening exercise. It's a speaking exercise. But you don't have to use coffee pot. You can use any word you like, right? But it actually practices a reading skill. Now, sometimes when we read, we practice the skill of like, oh, I don't know that word. Can I guess what that word means from its context in the sentence? Well, that's exactly the skill we're practicing with Coffee Pot. We're remembering vocabulary, recalling it from the text. Oh, there are coffee pots for 6,000 something passengers. Oh, what are the names? Where do passengers stay? Oh, yeah, cabins. So you have to work out the meaning from the context, right? Which is a reading skill. Okay, so that's an easy activity to recall vocabulary. And finally, use it. And in use it, we can have discussions. Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So in use it, work in pairs. Is the Oasis of the Seas a good place for a holiday? Why or why not? So here you're getting students to talk. Now, some students might answer this very well. Some students might be like this. They have no opinion. This happens with teenagers, right? Even if they understand the English, sometimes they just don't really have opinions, okay? Right, so we can do some work here. There are lots of ways to use this as a discussion, some very simple and some more challenging. So how do I get students talking about so there are lots of different speaking practice activities you can do. Discussions. And maybe with a discussion like this, with a weaker group, I would say you can draw something on the whiteboard, whether it's an interactive whiteboard online or a real one in the classroom. And just do, okay, Oasis of the Seas, good for a holiday. One column, good for a holiday, and why it's not good for a holiday. So you can get some ideas down first. Sometimes that helps, and then students discuss. Sometimes it helps to get ideas from them listed down first. You can have debates. So one student says, it's a great place for a holiday. Another student says, no, it's a terrible place for a holiday. With COVID-19, a cruise ship is one of the worst places you can be. So you could deliberately give them roles and debates. Extending from that, the third point is role plays. I think we all understand role plays. So for example, one of you imagine you are selling a holiday on a cruise ship and the other person is deciding what holiday to take. Okay, and then you can do simpler activities. So if your students just don't get into discussions, you can have reading aloud. So one very simple strategy for reading aloud is called taking bigger turns. So in taking bigger turns, what happens is this. Now let's see. So first, you have 3 students sitting together or in a breakout room if it's online. And first, each student takes their turn to read one sentence. So student 1 says, let's see, student 1, imagine a 5-star hotel with fantastic food and comfortable rooms. That's one sentence. Now student 2 reads out the next sentence. Imagine a square, shops, cinemas, and theaters. Student 3 reads out the next sentence. Imagine all of these things on one very big ship, Oasis of the Seas. Now it comes back to student 1. Okay, 3 students in the group. We're back to number 1. Now, this time, student 1 reads 2 sentences. More than 2,000 people work on Oasis of the Seas, and there are cabins for 6,360 passengers. That's a lot of people, and they eat a lot of food in the ship's 20 cafes and restaurants. Whew. Now, student number 2 reads 2 sentences. There are 250 chefs. It's the first ship with a park. Next, number 3 reads the next 2 sentences. And then if it's a longer text, back to student 1, they read 3 sentences. Student 2 reads 3 sentences, and so on. So that's a very easy way of getting students, even if students don't have discussions, at least they're revisiting the text and converting some reading into speaking. Okay, so this is really only for students who lack confidence with discussions and just don't do them. But I do think teachers can motivate students to have simple discussions. But if that doesn't work, there's something you can do. And finally, by far my favorite activity for post-reading, for speaking practice, right? We've had post-reading for vocabulary consolidation. Now we're doing post-speaking for speaking practice. I love retelling activities. So in retelling activities, there are many different ways to do this. Essentially, you're retelling things that you remember from the text to a partner. Okay, and so what I've got, remember my flowers, my word roses? So this is something I can write down if I'm a student or look at the whiteboard, and it helps me to remember. Now, I'm not going to be able to retell you everything I've read, but I can maybe tell you a few things. So I say, okay, so there's a ship which is a 5-star hotel. It's a very big ship, and there are comfortable rooms on the ship. Number 2, there are cabins for more than 6,000 passengers. There are 20 cafes and restaurants on the ship. Number 3, there is an exciting sports area. And it is the first ship with a park. Done. Now you see, students are using a mixture of their own words and vocabulary and phrases they've noted down to kind of retell information from the text. And again, this is great because students are kind of using their own words to tell information. It's a combination of practicing my English speaking and reusing words I've learned. And I won't remember everything, but the notes can help me. And then the other thing we can do is simply use the pictures. And instead of retelling information, I can either use the pictures to retell what I know, or just use the pictures to help me just say things. So I'm with my partner and I describe images. So, what do I remember about the ship, the central image? Its name is Oasis of the Seas. There are, I think, more than 6,000 passengers. I forget the number. What else do I remember? There are lots of chefs and there are lots of restaurants. Maybe I forget the details, but I'm speaking English. That's the point. What about the picture on the right, the climbing wall? Oh, there's a sports area on the ship and there's lots to do. including a climbing wall? What about Central Park? And I just say anything I can to describe the picture. Oh, this is a park in the middle of a ship. There are lots of like 50 trees or more, I think, I forget, and lots of plants. Okay, so these are all things that we can do to get students speaking. Right. So that's very quickly through that. So that's the main section of this session over, but the best gift for you is yet to come. So stay tuned. I just want to kind of just recap. Again, by far the most important thing for me is in the pre-reading, we get students interested. All right, they become curious, then they want to read, then they read, and then after they've read, they do something. It could be a discussion, it could be a vocabulary activity, it could be writing a bit, it could be anything, right? But that for me is how I conceive of, how I imagine pre, while, and post reading. Okay, that flow. Now, there is follow-up activity. So there is, okay, so I see some questions, which I will get to, but there is, in the workbook, there is more reading. And also, I want to show you that the reading is not in the reading lesson alone, okay, but it's also it links to other parts. So the reading lesson sets up the other skills lessons, and I will just take a look at the presenters chats. If you could, if there's any information for me, just let me know in the presenter tab on screen, okay? That's for Tracy and Sophia. So speaking, writing, and CLIL, very quickly, there's more reading. In the speaking lesson, you get a model text that's reading, and that provides input for speaking activities. The texts in the speaking also introduce key phrases, which I've highlighted at the bottom, in a very communicative and functional way. So what I'm saying here is reading is not just in the reading lessons, but there's reading in other skills lessons too. And it's the same in the writing lesson, where a model text provides input for all the activities on the page. And I've highlighted the key phrases because you'll see these key phrases in the reading. So you read, the students see key phrases, and then they use these key phrases to write. Okay, so reading plays an important role. We also have more practice in the form of a CLIL or culture lesson. There's one of those, there's either a CLIL or a culture lesson at the end of every unit. These texts are generally more challenging than the reading lesson text, okay, but they're still carefully graded. So CLIL introduces topics that students study, such as geography, social sciences, and so on. And then culture, students get a chance to often compare Vietnam's culture with cultures from elsewhere in the world. And sometimes it's learning about things like homeschooling, right? Students who study at home in the UK. Now, for the culture lessons in the teacher's guide, there are background notes to help you, the teacher, understand the cultural context and help your students. And there's also some vocabulary for you to teach too for support. So there's much more reading in Friends Plus, but today I've focused on the reading lesson. Okay, now I'm just going to take a look. I see there's some Q&A, and I'll try and answer those. But first, I need to tell you about teacher resources, because today I've focused on the reading lessons, but you should be aware that there's much more for you. For example, if you go to the teacher's web, so here you see the student book, workbook, teacher's guide, classroom presentation tool. If you want to find out about this, go to the teacher's website, okay? And Sophia will post that. So I can tell you that for reading, okay, you should, by the way, see a little link on the bottom of your screen. It says find out more. This to download free teaching resources. You click find out more, and then it'll open on the internet, and then you have to press the little X to close the offer. Okay, right. So to help you teach the reading lessons, there are teaching notes for every lesson, including optional extra activities in the teacher's guide. But there's more for you. There is more. On the website, the teacher's website, just for you in Vietnam, we have developed lesson plans which give you, some teachers said, oh, but I only have 45 minutes, what do I do? Well, we've made lesson plans exactly for the timings that you need. You can see 7 minutes for the warm-up, 8 minutes for pre-reading. And so you can use these if you like, okay, while reading, post-reading, consolidation. We also, but what if you kind of think, you know what, I don't want to follow exactly the lesson plan. I want to use my own ideas. Well, on the website, we have yet another kind of lesson plan for you. These are all in Word, Microsoft Word. And these lesson plans are called lesson plan templates. And what they are is they express, they're in PPP format. So for teachers who are used to presentation, practice, production, we put them in that format, but we apply them to every lesson. And here for the reading lesson, you see the gray areas. You can type in your own ideas here, but within the structure of a lesson plan. So if you want to make your own lesson plan, but that can take a lot of time, get this and just type it within the structure we give you. So that's 3 kinds of lesson plans we give you, right? The teacher's guide, lesson notes, the timed lesson plans for Vietnam, and these lesson plan templates. At the beginning of this webinar, someone said, oh, you know, we need a lesson plan for the whole lesson. You've got 3, and hopefully extra ideas from me, right? Which is my job, is more to give you extra ideas. Okay. Now you might be asking this, Mark, Oxford University Press, which by the way, oh look, I'm branded, but you can't see that. Okay. How can I find out more about the course? Tell me, Oxford University Press, I want to know. Well, I can't tell you everything about the course this morning, but my team, which is the Asia Educational Services team, have created something to help you learn more. It is called the Course Overview module. And so what we will do is we will share a link to this, and it's a course. Don't worry, there's no pass or fail, but to answer all the questions you have, you go to the link we will share with you, and you click on Start Course, and you begin. Okay, there's no one tracking it, I believe, so in your own time, and you can come back to this again and again and again. So here I've got a screenshot. I went in yesterday, and you can see this is the introduction. So that's June Lee. He's my colleague. He works in Seoul in Korea, and he will be delivering webinars to you soon. And so here's a nice introduction video from my team from June. And then if we focus on the red bit, I want to show you exactly what you get. Look at this. You get an introduction. You get a whole section on the pedagogies of Tieng and Sao, Friends Plus. You get the component, which I've done that, check. You get a components walkthrough and so on. You get a guide to digital resources. And so in that, you will see all of this information, but it's interactive. So if I click on Classroom Presentation Tool number 3, pop, I get information about that and how to use it. There's a full guide to each lesson, right? A unit walkthrough. There are videos to help you. So getting started with your classroom presentation tool. We let you know what additional resources there are for you on the website, where to find the tests, downloadable worksheets, and so on. So all there for you. Now, don't click on this link because it probably won't work. But Sophia, now, please can you share? There you go. So you will have a little pop-up, a little box, says Course Overview Module. Click on Find Out More. It will take you there. When you're there, if you want to minimize the box, just press the little X. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'll leave that. We'll just let you kind of have a look, give you a minute or so, well, maybe another 10 seconds. Meanwhile, I will start to look at some of your questions. I'll go to the top. Okay, so some of these questions, like do we check attendance? I think like Sophia in Vietnam can answer that, right? Because I'm not really looking at your names or attendance. My job is teacher training. I'm an expert in pedagogy. So maybe Sophia can do that. Do we check attendance? I don't think so. Okay. Oh, Sorry, some of you have answered. Let's see. So can all so published. Okay, can all students have different phrases? If you change, well, okay, so I answered that. I think that's a question. Some of these questions now are perhaps out of context. But can all students have different phrases? No, but there are enough phrases. There were 12 phrases on the whiteboard. This is for the sit-down activity. As long as you're not choosing a phrase exactly the same as the student next to you, it's fine. It works. I've done it many times. It works. That way you don't know what other people's phrases are, you see. You just know that yours is different from the people next door to you. So that's not an issue. Okay, so thank you for that question. Vu, for the Vu says, for the sit-down, stand-up activity, how do we know if a student really has chosen a phrase because they just could sit down randomly? Now, remember I told you, that's a very good question. But first, I tell the person next to me my phrase. Oh, I've got comfortable room, comfortable cabins, or something like that. Guess what? Not only does this ensure that I have a different phrase than the person next to me, but it means this person knows what my phrase is, and so I cannot cheat because I have two people, one either side of me, who know what my phrase is, and so they will know if I'm cheating and just sitting down. Okay, so the students police each other. That's how it's designed. Okay. There's a question about I missed the word rows predictions. Well, never mind, because Sophia, can you come on? Like, will there be a recording? Because a lot of these questions can be asked. I have a few questions like, oh, I missed this bit. Can you talk about it again? I don't unfortunately have time to repeat sections of this webinar, but there is a recording, right? This is being recorded, so you can watch the recording. So that's very useful. Let's see. Some of the questions I'll choose maybe two more. All right, someone's asked how much time for each reading activity. Well, we have those lesson plans on the website, which do actually tell you the timings, okay? But, every text is different, every class is different. I cannot tell you that this activity will always be 3 minutes, this one be 4 minutes. But generally, for the phases, yeah, take a look in the lesson plans on the website, and they will give you an indication of how much time to spend in the pre, while, and post phase. But the true answer is it does depend on the lesson, right? And it does depend on your students' needs as well. I have to understand my class and my students and what they need in order to answer that question. And so generally, thanks for your helpful presentation. You're very, very welcome. Can you tell us more about how to motivate students to read? Well, for me, I would just repeat a keyword I said, which is motivation. And then, curiosity. I get my students curious in a reading lesson. The other thing I do is show them the value of reading. So one thing I like to do is get my students to, at the beginning, I say, okay, read this text. How was that? Some of them say it's hard. But after reading it 3 or 4 times and listening and doing work, I say to them, how much more confident do you feel now? And they say, or I get them to read it and see if they can read it quicker. Something I really like to do is timed repeated reading. And timed repeated reading is this. Students read the text the first time and they time how long it takes them to read. They read it again, they time it, they read it again, they time it, and they see that each time they read, they get faster and faster, and they get more comfortable and fluent, and they understand the text more. And I say, well, that's something you can practice on your own. The more you read it, the quicker you're getting, the easier reading becomes. And that's a way I use to motivate students to practice reading more and see that they can gain fluency and increase their confidence through that. Okay, so I think I've answered all the questions I can. Okay, and let me kind of continue with the session. And Sophia, what's happened is I have lost the ability to move my slides forward. Okay, so if you could move the slide forward for me. Here you see a QR code, so you can get your phone and you can take a picture. It's exactly the same it's just another way of sharing the link to the course overview module. Okay, so you can take a look at that. And Sophia, if we can move to the next slide. Thank you. And that's it. Don't go, because I will hand you back to Sophia, who has more information for you about our upcoming webinars. But you've told me about what you like and about teaching reading and the challenges. I've given you an overview of Friends Plus, but remember, go to the course overview module and find out much, much more. And the main thing is we've had activities in many different ways, lots of activities, and just choose one or two for the pre-reading, one or two for while reading, one or two for post-reading, along with the ideas in the teacher's guide and our 2 kinds of lesson plans on your website, the teacher's website. And you've got lots of ideas there, I hope, for engaging, not just any old reading lessons, but engaging your students into reading lessons. And finally, we shared with you teacher resources, and find out more on the teacher's website. Thank you. Now I can see the slides. I can move my slides, Sophia. Thank you. I can find out more on the teacher's website and on the course overview module. Okay, so everyone, I would like to end by saying thank you all very, very much. I will say goodbye, take care, and over to Sophia. So Sophia, welcome back.
Thank you, Mark, for your presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you for your support.
Cảm ơn Mark về buổi thuyết trình. Chúng tôi cũng gửi lời cảm ơn quý thầy cô đã tham gia buổi hội thảo trực tuyến ngày hôm nay, và hy vọng nội dung bài chia sẻ sẽ giúp quý thầy cô trong công tác giảng dạy của mình. Trong quá trình thực hiện hội thảo cũng chắc chắn sẽ không tránh khỏi những thiếu sót. Chúng tôi rất mong nhận được sự thông cảm từ quý thầy cô. Trong vài ngày tới, chúng tôi sẽ gửi email đến quý thầy cô các tài liệu của buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay, bao gồm file recording, file PDF, để quý thầy cô có thể tiện xem lại khi cần. Quý thầy cô vui lòng kiểm tra các hộp thư của mình nhé. Chúng tôi cũng rất ước mong được chào đón quý thầy cô tham gia nhóm Facebook của chúng tôi với tên gọi Hội Giáo viên Tiếng Anh dạy sách Friends Series. Nhóm là nơi để các thành viên chia sẻ ý kiến, tài nguyên cũng như các phương pháp giảng dạy tiếng Anh. Để tham gia, quý thầy cô chỉ cần click vào phần offer đang hiện ra trên màn hình. Thứ Bảy tuần tới, tiếp nối chuỗi hội thảo trực tuyến tiếng Anh 6 Friends Plus sẽ là chủ đề chia sẻ một số phương pháp dạy listening hiệu quả, sẽ được chia sẻ bởi Oliver Bailey. Để đăng ký, quý thầy cô chỉ cần click vào phần offer đang hiện ra trên màn hình, và rất mong sẽ đón tiếp quý thầy cô. Và sau cùng, phản hồi của quý thầy cô rất quan trọng để chúng tôi có thể hoàn thiện và đem lại những trải nghiệm tốt nhất đến với quý thầy cô trong các buổi hội thảo trực tuyến sắp tới. Do đó, rất mong quý thầy cô có thể dành thêm ít phút để hoàn thành link khảo sát về buổi hội thảo trực tuyến ngày hôm nay. Tôi sẽ gửi link khảo sát đến quý thầy cô ngay bây giờ. Và sau cùng thì phòng hội thảo trực tuyến sẽ được duy trì trong vòng 10 phút tiếp theo. Tôi vẫn ở đây để hỗ trợ quý thầy cô. Sau 10 phút, phòng hội thảo sẽ được đóng. Quý thầy cô có thể rời phòng hội thảo ngay lúc này bằng cách đóng trình duyệt. Tôi xin được phép tắt camera và được tiếp tục hỗ trợ tại cửa sổ chat. Một lần nữa, cảm ơn quý thầy cô đã tham dự và ước mong sẽ được chào đón quý thầy cô ở các buổi hội thảo trực tuyến tiếp theo của Nhà xuất bản Đại học Oxford. Xin chào và tạm biệt.
We are the world's largest university press.
We are over
6,000 people
Worldwide.
na nakaaabot sa bawat sulok ng mundo.
In ungefähr 100 Sprachen.
We are part of Oxford University and we are active in